Hi and welcome. Today we're doing another part of our set review with Trumpetman, and this time we're going to focus on rares and mythics. Before we go into the card evaluation, just a few review rules. We are evaluating the cards based on previous set game and hand win rates. So we basically try to estimate where the cards that we're evaluating are going to land. And in order to do it, all the sets have slightly different win rates. What we needed to normalize the win rates of all those sets to make them average 50%. And then basically we plotted all those cards, so what were the win rates, and we clustered them in different groups. And based on those clustering and how many cards we think should be in A+ level, A level, and B, C level, we estimated the win rates of cards that put them in a particular tier. And that means obviously like the cards that were winning the most are going to be A's, the cards that are always losing are going to be F's, and everything in between. So in this estimation, grades A+ are the cards that have a win rate of over 60%. Now keep in mind, of course, there are many cards that have a win rate of over 60% in 17 lands data, but it's because the 17 lands data is generally at 56% win rate average in games and hand win rate. So if we drop it down to 50%, those cards are going to go lower. So there's actually very few cards that have over 60% win rate. Examples being Miglos and Shieldred the Apocalypse.
And then for A's, same thing. A lot of cards that tend to be having, 65% win rate cards, but once we normalize it, these are the cards that are in the 58 to 60% range with that normalized data. Examples are Fable the Mirrorbreaker and Siege Veteran.
And then, there's A minuses. These are going to be a bit more common than the A's and A pluses. There you had 8 and 20 cards. Now we have 77 cards that are falling in the win rate between 55 and 58. And here we have one common actually that made it into the A grade, that was Inspiring Overseer from Streets of New Capenna, and cards like Thronebreaker of Silence were there.
And then the B pluses, and I kind of want to draw specific attention to like these A minuses, B plus, all these differences, because when we think about these cards, because we're doing the rare and mythic review today, these are kind of like the gradations that we're talking about. But B pluses are really these like all stars, hyper efficient, kind of make or break games, but maybe not quite at the bomb level. So you do still see some uncommons. These are the cards that are 53.5 to 55% win rate. Been 95 cards since Midnight Hunt, but here we have two uncommons listed from one. We have Rebel Salvo and Evolving Adaptive. So you can kind of see like super powerful, or they have, game warping effects, but not quite at the A range.
And then we have the Bs. These are the cards that are 52.5 to 53.5% win rate. Around 100 cards fit in that category out of 2,000 that we analyzed. So, like 5% of cards fall into that category. And examples are Imperial Oath, so a super powerful common, or Reckless Stormseeker, like a really solid rare, but maybe in a color that was not powerful on its own.
For B minuses, we have our cards from 51.5 to 52.5%, about 150 cards in the sample size. And examples are Kumana Faces Kakazan, so again, just really efficient card. And then also Aether Channeler from Dumb and United, where if a card has a lot of flexibility, that can also be a reason that it makes this B minus grade.
And then we have C pluses. These are cards that are above 50% normalized win rate, so they are winning more than losing, but not by much. 270 cards, so more than 10% of the cards will fall in that category, so it's a large category. Examples: Echo Inspector, Infectious Bite from one. So solid cards, you want to have them in your deck, but you're not going to go out of the way to first pick them, for example.
C's are the cards that make up the bulk of your deck. They generally are commons and uncommons. So if you're interested in that, go listen to the other review. The win rates for these are 49 to 50% of the normalized data set. 211 cards overall. Two examples are commons: Phalanx Vanguard from Brothers War, the 2/2 Vigilance, and then Glamorous Outlaw, the 4/5 Vampire from Streets of New Capenna.
Yeah, and we don't expect many of those, but if you have like a creature that has this decent stats, so it's like, I don't know, 2/3 flyer for 3 mana.
I did put a C, so I remember.
Oh yeah. and they have some ability that's clearly a
Marginal.
constructed plan.
Yeah.
Constructed plans, for example, you won't have that kind of synergy. They will make it a C. And C minuses are those slightly under par cards, but you're still happy to play them, or maybe cards that are slightly overplayed, because you have to keep in mind, because our grading system is based on what we predict from 17 lens users, sometimes we will predict that 17 lens users are going to play the card slightly wrong, or maybe put them in the wrong deck some amount of the time, and that will drop the grade of the card, even though we think maybe the card is slightly stronger than that, but we would play it in very few decks.
And then D pluses are kind of like these niche cards. They can be role players in certain archetypes, but they're not overall like decent playables that are going to make up the archetype. So the 47 to 48% win rate cards, examples Rotten Reunion from Midnight Hunt, and then also Bring the Ending recently from Phyrexia.
And then we have the Ds. These are the cards that are slightly under par. You are not happy when they end up in your deck. Gift of Wrath from Kamigawa or Goring Warplow from Brothers War are example of those cards. We won't have many of those in this review, I'm pretty sure, but maybe there are a couple.
And then the D minuses, like technically you can play them. These are the cards 42 to 45% win rate. Not too many, 150 roughly out of the 2000. But Gixian Skullflare from 1, hard to turn on. Goblin Firebomb from Bro. And both of them cards you're not happy to play, but I mean, technically you could. Probably not going to be too many rares and mythics at that level.
And there's apps, and these, there are rares that are going to be apps. These were the cards that have the win rate of under 42%, 88 cards since mid, so quite a large chunk. And these are mainly constructed plans, cards that are sideboard cards for constructed, or cards that are printed for particular usefulness in Commander. I don't know, like the Field of Ruin from 2 sets back. These are cards you want to avoid playing. They might be sometimes tempting, like Goblin Childbirther, that you think you can build a deck that will utilize them well. Most of the time, no. You're just fooling yourself. And we're going to try to tell you that there are a couple of cards in this set where you will be potentially tempted to fool yourself like that. And that goes for the grading. We move to the multicolor cards. And we structure our review based on idea borrowed from Lords of Limited, when they sometimes have a short episode instead of a set review when they talk about cards that they disagree with the most. And we decided to adopt at least a part of that idea into our review. We put the cards where we agree the most early, and the longer we discuss particular color group, the more disagreements there will be. So we hope to ease you into the multicolor cards by talking about things that we agree on, and then as we progress and you get used to how we talk, you get more and more disagreements, and then you can see when we will do more arguments and so on. So maybe you can start with the first one.
Absolutely. So the first one that we're 100% simpatico on is Baral and Kari Zev. 1 blue-red for a 2/4 legendary creature human. It's a rare. It has lots of text. So here we go. First Strike and Menace. And whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you may cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, create First Mate Ragavan, a legendary 2/1 red monkey pirate creature token. It gains haste until end of turn. So a lot of stuff going on here, but at the end of the day, you get a 3 mana, 2/4 First Strike Menace. We both said, that's pretty good rate. Maybe that alone would be a B minus, something like that. But we did note that this card does have an ability. So we bumped it up to, we both said, hey, this is a B. Pretty good body on this card. And then anytime you cast an instant or sorcery, getting to put Ragavan into play, basically, so that you can have a 2/1 that can attack and block. That's pretty great because anytime you do that and then you can trade off the monkey, you can just do that again with your next spell. Or if you've already cast Ragavan or you want to, chain spells together, you can do that too with the instants and sorceries. Didn't quite get higher than the B because it's not necessarily going to be what the game is about, but it could be in some cases. So we both like Baral and Kari Zeb a decent amount.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe you will actually get to cast something for free and gain 3 mana out of it, which will be great. Next card we have, then also we agree on, is Invasion of Tolvada. That's 3 white black for an invasion battle. siege card. It has the front side of a normal battle. It has an ability, in this case, when it enters the battlefield, return target non-battle permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield. And it has 5 defense, so if you deal 5 damage to it, it will flip. And it flips into the Broken Sky, an enchantment. It says creature tokens you control get +1/+0 and have lifelink. And also it says at the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. So there is not like a lot of synergy with tokens in white or black, but there are some tokens. There are the incubate creatures that will become bigger and get lifelink, which is great. That's enough, I think. And as I graded the card, I thought, look, 5 mana for a reanimation spell is maybe 1 mana more expensive than you would normally pay. There are a couple of sacrifice abilities in this format, which means that you can fill your graveyard. There are some self-mill things that will mill creatures into your graveyard, which is also good. And the flip side is an enchantment, which is hard to remove. It generates value every turn because it generates a 2/1 flying lifelinker. And that enough was a B for me. But I'm putting a B on it with a caveat that I really want to flip this saga because this battle because most of its value is on the reverse side of it.
Yeah, that's pretty funny on that one, Circovitz, because I was looking at this card too. Like if you just could play the backside for 5 mana, that would be like an A- to A level card. But we have to downgrade it because you need to jump through some hoops with the reanimate on the front, which is more like a D plus, because it's pretty expensive, and so that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Our next one is a whammy, as many are. Zurgo and Ojutai, 2 blue, red, white for a 4/4 legendary orc dragon at Mythic, and has flying and haste. And what do you get when you smash Zurgo and Ojutai together? Well, it has hexproof as long as it enters the battlefield this turn, of course, Ojutai. And whenever one or more dragons you control deal combat damage to a player or battle, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So you get to get an extra card, nice card advantage there. And then kind of a weird part of this card, it says you may return one of those dragons to its owner's hand when you deal damage. Why is that there? Well, because Zurgo dashes. That's the joke. So this card is 4/4 flying haste is basically like a super goldspan dragon type thing that gives you card advantage and is pretty insane. Doesn't ramp you, and so you have to sort of take the ramp from a dragon and replace it with card advantage, all this other kind of nonsense. The card's really good. The only thing holding it back maybe from the A range is the fact that it's 3 colors of mana. So we said, hey, this card's great, B plus for it. If you can cast it, it's going to be amazing, and I would take it and play it.
Yeah, also great engine for the late game when you can replay it every turn, guaranteed that this has hexproof and just draw extra cards and you have enough mana probably to cast other spells.
That's pretty crazy.
We have Rankle and Torbran, 1 black, black, red, red for a legendary creature fairy dwarf. It's a 3/4 flying first strike and haste. Whenever Rankle and Torbran deals combat damage to a player or battle, choose any number of the following abilities. Each player creates a treasure token. Each player sacrifices a creature. If a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn, it deals that much damage +2 instead, which is the Torbran ability. Now, the joke here is, of course, that because it has first strike, it will deal the damage to a player before your other creatures that don't have first strike will deal it. So if you choose the last ability, all your other attackers will get +2 attack, basically. And also any spells that you're going to cast after that are going to be dealing +2 damage if you have any kind of direct damage spells. It's hard to cast because it costs the black, black, and red, red. So you definitely want to play it only in the black, red decks. But flying first strike haste plus a bunch of abilities that you can situationally be benefiting from, I think that's just enough to give it into a B minus range. Probably a card that I won't be willing to first pick, but definitely a really good reward for you being in the red black lane in the draft and getting it slightly later, maybe in later packs.
Yep. Then, I get a nice clean one here. Yargle and Multani. 3 black, black, green. It's an 18/6.
I thought that if you have a vanilla creature, you need to read the flavor text, but okay.
I'm trying to save you time. No, anyways, so you know, being a rare legendary creature, that's not going to matter too much. But how good is a 6 mana 18/6? Well, it's gigantic, right? And your opponent has to block it or they're going to die basically in one hit. And there are some nice little tricks in the set, or maybe you can somehow find a way to fly it into the air or give it trample or do something silly with this card. Even if you don't, your opponent has to respect it, right? So we said, that definitely makes the game about this card, although your opponent can just kill it or trade with it. So we still said, hey, this is a C plus card because it needs a lot of help to really do something crazy. But this is definitely going to be some games where you play this and the board is clear and your opponent's like, well, I'm in trouble.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, a slight knock back on the card is that the 2 mana black common can kill it, and then the 6 mana red common can also kill it, but still decent. Oh, so you got a vanilla and I get this? Nice. Must be nice. We got a slight disagreement on the card. Invasion of New Pyrexia. It's a battle siege. It costs white, blue, and X. It has 6 defense. And what it says, when Invasion of New Phyrexia enters the battlefield, create X 2/2 white and blue knight creature tokens with vigilance. And if you flip it, it turns into Teferi Akosa of Zalfir, a planeswalker with 3 abilities, +1, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. -2, you get an emblem with knights you control, get +1/+0 and have ward 1. And -3, tap X creatures you control. When you do, shuffle target non-land permanent and opponent controls with mana value X or less into its owner's library. So sort of removal. You gave it A minus. I gave it an A. I don't think
I
that's
think I'm wrong.
I don't think it's like a big difference. I gave it an A mainly because the front side of the battle is just good enough. Because you play it for 5 mana, you got 3/2/2 vigilance. You play it for 6 mana, you get the 4/2/2 vigilance creatures. At some moment, you don't even need to flip it. Because putting so much power and toughness with vigilance on board is just going to be enough, especially when you have some other knight synergies. Maybe you have the Night Lord, that will be pretty busted. But if you are playing a game when you can flip it, then definitely Teferi is my favorite version of Teferi. It's the one that doesn't want to dirtle, the one that wants to go face. Making those emblems, especially when you generated a bunch of tokens earlier, is going to be great. The pseudo removal ability is also not terrible at all. But I can see that probably the most common kind of pattern of playing with this card is going to be make an emblem, or maybe make an emblem, draw a card, make another emblem, and then go on from there. Opponents should be, the emblem stack. You can make multiples. So yeah, great card. I think we both agree it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I just gave it a minus because I wasn't thinking, but I mean the card is busted, and I agree. I think it's an A. I think it's probably not an A plus because there are some games where it doesn't save you, like it doesn't block flyers, that kind of thing. But it's not hard to make the game about this.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I love that the fact that white blue is aggressive. Eat this, Gandalf.
All right. Well, I'm on the other side of things. I think this card's a little better than you do. So here we go. Drana and Linvala. 1 white, white, black for a 3/4 legendary creature vampire angel at rare. It has flying and vigilance, and activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. And Drana and Linvala has all activated abilities of all creatures your opponents control. You may spend mana as though you were mana of any color to activate those abilities. So a little bit hard to cast. How good is a 4 mana 3/4 flying vigilance? I definitely give some bonus points for flying and vigilance in this set, and it's just reasonably statted. So already like a 4 mana 3/4 flying vigilance, that is like B minus to B level territory. But how much do we get from these extra abilities? I really, really like the fact that it shuts down opponents' abilities. That doesn't seem like it's necessarily going to be that insane, but we have to remember there's a bunch of the transform creatures at common and uncommon, and this basically just doesn't let them transform. Not that stealing that ability is really that great for Drawn and Linvala, but there's going to be like random abilities that you can steal and that actually are going to be good. Like maybe your opponent has the creature that lets you pay a bunch of mana to double the counters on your uh, incubate tokens or whatever. Like if you happen to be able to steal something, even better. But I think shutting down your opponents and sometimes getting that ability bumps it up to B plus for me.
Yeah, you can have a tapper, for example. That's a great thing on
Yeah, that would be
Vigilant
good.
Flyer. Yeah.
Whew.
I mean, I put it on a B because I mean B plus is quite a high level, I would say, and I think that it's going to very much depend if it's based on our grading system, if it's going to be B plus or B on how good white black is really. And I assume that white black is going to be good enough to make it a B, but not good enough to make it a B plus. That's basically the only difference, I think, because all the other evaluation, I completely agree with you.
All right. I got to respect it.
Scorcho, do you want to add something? I don't think so. I just gave you food. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you in a later moment. Okay, another card we have is Talia and the Gitrog Monster. One white, black, green for a legendary creature, human frog horror. It has first strike and death touch, which is usually considered to be a good combination of skills. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, which I don't think is a very important part on the lands, but on the creatures, yes. And whenever Talia and the Gitrog monster attack, sacrifice a creature or land and then draw a card. Keep in mind you have to sacrifice a creature or land, so it's non-optional. You gave it a B, I gave it a B minus. I gave it a B minus, I think mainly because of the difficulty of casting the card. Because I think, of course, all the abilities are good. I don't think that sacrificing a land is a terrible price to pay for drawing a card and slamming with the first strike or death toucher. Because by that time, you can also sacrifice all your lands and you're still going to win that game. But yeah, still B minus because of the difficulty of casting it and potentially people first picking it and then trying to draft weird deck. On slight defense, I think that white, black, and green have a coherent theme of incubate tokens. So maybe actually there is an Abzan deck of some sort in the format.
Yeah, and I didn't downgrade it quite as much because one of the colors is green, and I think there is quite a lot of fixing in the format if you really want to make this work. There's, common two-color lands, now obviously only in 50% of packs, but I just think if you're base green-white or green-black, it's not going to be that hard to actually cast Thalia, and the card is like insanely good. So yes, I mean, it's probably somewhere between B and B minus just in terms of that rating. It's probably on that fine line. But I said, I think maybe it's possible. So I went to B.
Yep.
All right. Our beautiful card illustration for this stream is Borborygmos and Fibblethip, giant Cyclops and our little friend on top, full Ratatouille mode. And 2 green, blue, red for a 6/5 legendary Cyclops Homunculus at Mythic. Whenever Borborygmos and Fibblethip enter the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. Then you may discard any number of land cards. When you discard one or more land cards this way, Borborygmos and Fibblethip deals twice that much damage to target creature. And because Fibblethip is there, you could pay 1 and a blue to put Borborygmos and Fibblethip into its owner's library third from the top. So a 5 mana 6/5, pretty good stats there. Nothing insanely good, but pretty good. That's already passable. That would be between a C and C plus if we think about it. And then coming in immediately, you get to draw a card already. So, enter the battlefield, draw a card. It's replacing itself if you want. But then you get the option, if you do have some lands, you can turn those lands into kill spells. That's really strong. Can help clear the way, attack a battle, do something with it, or, just kind of be like a functional Razormane Mastercore when you want it to be. Razormane, whatever the Mastercore was in the last set. I don't know. You can discard some lands and get value off of it. I'm not sure how much the Fibblethip mode on the card matters, like being able to shuffle in your deck, but it's certainly nice if you have the mana. Your opponent can't really remove this. Again, the only thing really holding this back, I think, is the mana cost. I didn't discount it that much because, again, it's in green. I think it's going to be pretty easy for to cast this card. And a lot of the times it's going to take over games because every single turn you're attacking and you're at least drawing the card with this. So pretty strong card. And Trezio reminds me in the chat, says Argentum Masticore. I was thinking of the 5th Dawn Masticore because I'm old. Long and short of it, this Bulbarigmos, and I guess Fibblethip too, they get a B for me.
I'm not old. I just know the original one, though, in terms of Masticores. Yeah, I just gave it slightly lower grade. I find that honestly, I agree with everything you said. I just gave it a different grade based on the same rationale, which is fine because we have a slightly coherent grading scale, but that doesn't mean that we're thinking about it exactly in the same way.
It's hard to turn percents into numbers, letter grades, and also this is literally our inaugural address of the set review. So I feel like we'll only get better if we do this in the future, you know?
Oh yeah, we're gonna get sort of like calibration of our own heads on top of everything. Also, it's going to be at the end of the format. We're going to make a stream when we're going to evaluate our gradings and see where our shortcomings were, and potentially try to analyze why.
Love it.
Okay, Glissa, Herald of Predation, 3 black green, legendary creature, Phyrexian zombie elf. It's a 3/5. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose 1. Incubate 2 twice. So you make 2 incubator tokens with 2+1/+1 counters on them. Or transform all incubator tokens you control. Or Phyrexians you control gain first strike and death touch until end of turn. I give it an A-. You gave it a B+. I think it's pretty close. The card is really, really strong because when you think about it, you play it, you instantly can incubate twice. Unless you already have a good board of Phyrexians, then you just choose to give him all first strike and death touch until end of turn and slam, because obviously a first striker death toucher will kill anything that blocks it. Or if you have a bunch of incubator tokens already on board, you can just transform them and slam with those. Whatever you do, you're going to be good. And then next turn, you can of course attack with Glissa and either transform the incubators you created a turn ago, or give first strike and death touch until end of turn.
Yep, agree with all that. I just went B+, just slightly lower, because I could imagine games where you're paying 5 to get a 3/5, and if you're really far behind and things are bad, like this card is good on defense in the sense that you can get those 2/2s the following turn. Like if you incubate and then next turn you flip them. But it does require you just like having a 3/5 sitting in play and then doing that next turn. You do get value immediately. But if you're really far behind, this might not save you. And I kind of think of that in terms of the A range. That's the only difference.
Yeah, I think that, one small thing about it. I think that in this format, you're not going to be that far behind on turn 5.
I agree with you.
So hopefully, even if you play it, then you can still flip some of those incubate tokens.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those. Like if I had done the whole common uncommon set review and then graded this card, I probably would have maybe joined you on the in the A range, just because we read like incubate, and like as I was grading, it was more spread out in my mind. But there's a lot. It's gonna be. I think it is gonna be close between these two grades, though.
Yeah, it's definitely a very powerful card, and you're going to curse it a lot when you cannot deal with it, because that's the card that you need to deal with instantly.
Right. Well, how about Quintorius Loremaster? 3 red white for a 3/5 legendary elephant cleric at rare. Has vigilance. And at the beginning of your instep, exile target non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. You can also pay 1 red white and tap it to sacrifice one of those spirits or any other spirit. To choose target card exiled with Quintorius, you may cast that card this turn without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, put it on the bottom of its owner's library instead. So we went from a 5 mana 3/5 with a bunch of abilities to a 5 mana 3/5 with much abilities. I thought, well, I don't know. These cards look pretty similar and busted, so I gave them both B pluses. But more realistically, I really like that Quintorius allows you to instantly get the 3/2. Doesn't come into play tapped or anything, so it just quickly builds the board. And if you have some really strong spells, you can cast them again down the line. So the card just seems really strong to me. Although there is some setup cost, because if you don't have anything to hit right away, this card's literally a 5-mana 3/5. So there are some fail cases, but I don't think it's going to be that hard to set up.
Yep.
So B plus for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. Coincidentally, you can sacrifice Yargle to its ability to recast a spell if you really want to, as it is a spirit. Yeah, I like the ability. I don't know how often you will sacrifice the spirit to cast a spell, but I guess some spells are strong enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Or you block with the spirit and then turn it into a spell or something. We'll see.
Yeah, you can get battles back like this also, so that's an interesting option. I put it on a B because I've been scarred by Quintorius before.
That's true. You just start it at an F and then you read it again and slowly creep it up.
No,
Because
I mean
the other one is
the
the other one's so
Quintorius.
good, but it wasn't a bad archetype.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I like the card. B is a really good grade, and it's like a first pickable card, even though it's a multicolor. So yeah, I mean, definitely, I like it. Now we have Hidetsugu and Kairi. 2 blue black for a legendary creature, ogre demon dragon, 5/4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you brainstorm. And then when it dies, exile the top card of your library. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value. If it is an instant or sorcery card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So obviously, just a 5-mana 5/4 flyer is good enough for me to put it on the B range. Then Brainstorm is not as powerful in limited as this is in constructed, but designed to have Brainstorm in the deck. So obviously, that part is not going to be as important. And then the death trigger, it's going to be probably random in this game because you cannot really set it up most of the time, or you don't want to sacrifice it to get the trigger because you maybe want to do it in constructed when you have like something like what are those 3-color cards that have busted abilities all the time? They were in Ikoria.
I don't know. I never played
Ruin
Ikoria. Ultimatums.
Ultimatum.
Yes.
Yeah, ultimatums. So you want to do that maybe in constructed with something like an ultimatum, but here it's going to be probably maybe deal 2 damage to something, maybe lock out an instant because it was on top, but it's less relevant. I mean, it's still there. I still gave it an A plus because I think it's big enough for toughness. Is actually quite a useful amount of toughness because it avoids all the 3 damage spells, which are quite plentiful in this format. And the body is just amazing. 5 power is flipping battles quite easily if you don't want to attack face initially. And again, Brainstorm, not as good as in Constructed, but still pretty good when you can have some selection.
Yeah, you gave it that A minus, and I was almost there with you. I didn't give that much credit to that second ability with the dying and getting the card. I do think, I mean, it's going to come up. Especially as good with some of the convoke spells. So like, you might get something pretty expensive because of course they're designed to be more expensive, and you maybe deal your opponent more damage or something cool with that. But I mostly evaluated this like how good is a 5-mana 5/4 flying brainstorm creature, which is like pretty busted, but it technically doesn't like do anything beyond that. Like it's in a way it's good at blocking because 5/4 is decent at that, but it doesn't do anything beyond that when it comes into play. Like if you trade it off, yes, you have the card on top, maybe that's great, but not always. So just slightly lower. I went B plus, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did reach that A minus range.
It also might be that Dimir is not going to be very strong, and then of course it will take a hit from being in bad decks.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's easily splashable in some blue.
But what if Dimir is great and it's even better?
I did archetype skeletons today, and I don't think Dimir is going to be busted. It might be okay, but I don't think
Dimir always gets the short end of the stick. It looks great, and then it's just usually terrible.
Well, at least this time it doesn't even look great. So that's
Oh,
fine.
maybe it'll be amazing then. We'll see.
Maybe, who knows?
All right. Our next one is Kogla and Yadaro. 2 red, green for a 7/7 legendary ape dinosaur turtle at rare. When they enter the battlefield, choose one. Koglin Yodaro gain trample and haste until end of turn, or they fight target creature you don't control, which would basically kill it. In addition, you could pay 2 red and a green to discard Koglin Yodaro to destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment. Shuffle Koglin Yodaro into your library from your graveyard, then draw a card. So a kind of card to cast 7/7, though it's kind of similar to the Wrinkle we looked up earlier, where it's like the 2 mana of each type. As long as you're in that color pair, I think you're going to be able to cast the card most of the time. So I don't hold it that much against it, but it's not splashable. So that does bring it down some. But 6 mana, most of the time you can get to that point of the game. Games start to kind of end around there. You can't always cast your 6 drops. But what do you get for that if you can? Well, you get a 7/7 trample haste, which could just end the game if you're ahead. Might just be like that's the game. Or if you're a little bit behind or kind of more at parity, getting to kill basically anything, because 7/7 win every fight is pretty insane. That already I think would make this card be in the B range. On top of that, being able to destroy an artifact or enchantment if you can't, this card's rotting your hand, maybe you don't have the double color that you need, or you're not getting to the 6 mana. There's a lot of good artifacts and enchantments. There's some busted enchantments we saw that are on the flips of battles. If your opponent has a random 5/5 Phyrexian incubation token running around, you can blow that up with the ability. So I think having that second mode is pretty nice as a failsafe for this card. So it kind of bumped it up even a little more for me. So, I was kind of at B, but I thought, okay, I like the failsafe too. So I gave it a B+.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think B is too low for this card. When I think that I gave Rankle a B- or something, this one is markedly better than Rankle for similar kind of effects. I'm going to move to B+ actually.
So I got one.
You got it.
Yay.
Croxa and Kunoros. 3 red, white, black. Legendary creature, Elder Giant, dog. I guess. Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink. Whenever Croxa and Kunoros enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. I gave it A-, you gave it a B+. I gave it a A- because Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink is just a hell of an ability. I mean, this is the grown test for any aggro deck in the format here. If the opponent plays this feels like Elder Gargaroth. And also the fact that it can reanimate stuff by exiling cards from your graveyard. Which against some matchups, actually, it's good to exile a bunch of cards from your graveyard because they want you to have 8 cards in it. And you basically have 6. You get rid of 5 and put the best thing out of your graveyard onto the battlefield. Is just great. I mean, I understand you're half a grade lower, but that's again.
Yeah, it's 3 colors.
Cosmetic.
Everything you said is true. And I was like, I don't see a green mana symbol, so I just took a little bit off for that. Although it is a flavor fail because isn't Kunoros the dog that defends the underworld and makes nothing leave graveyards? I don't know what's going on with that, but obviously the card is busted.
That is a flavor fail. You're right. Card is busted though, yeah.
All right. Galta and Mavrin is next. Some more busted cards. 3 green, white for a 12/12 legendary dinosaur vampire. There's a type line you never thought you would see.
Nope.
It's a rare. It has trample. And when you attack, not when it attacks, but when you attack, choose one. Create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur creature token with trample, where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures. So, you play this on 7, maybe you got a 4 or 5 power creature to play, boom, another 5 or 4 power creature attacking too. Pretty good. Or you can create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. So again, it comes in, you attack with 3 things, but none of them are that big. Great, make 3 1/1s. And then you have even more 1/1s next turn, which it obviously gets nasty from there. The only thing holding this card back is it costs 7 mana. Because it seems completely insane. And if you untap with it, you also have a 12/12 attacking. So it impacts the board immediately when it comes down. And then it's even better after that. I gave it a B-. It's obvious the power's there for sure. like 100%. I just wonder how often are we going to get to 7 in the format. However, there's a lot of ramp in the format that we've seen, so that helps. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and battles also make the game go longer rather than shorter. So I think if there's a format where 7 drops are going to be good, it's probably going to be this one. So I could see this card being better than a B minus. I just wasn't sure how often we're going to get there with it.
Yeah, I was optimistic that I will be casting 7 mana spells in this format. That's why I put it on B.
Makes sense.
Obviously, you can cast it on turn 3 in constructed quite regularly if you have Sorin, which I think is a problem with the printing of this card. It shouldn't have been a vampire. It's just like too much.
But isn't that like older formats?
Yeah, Pioneer or something.
It's
But
fine.
anyway,
They can handle it.
that's fine. Yeah, let them have it. But I still think it's a B. I think that 7 mana is going to be easy enough to do, and the ability is just good.
Okay. Yeah.
Errant and Giada. Here we have a slightly bigger difference in evaluation. 1 white blue legendary creature, human angel with flash, flying. It's a 2/3. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast spells with flash or flying from the top of your library. You gave it a B minus. I gave it a C. I treat it basically as a vanilla 2/3 flyer with flash, and I graded it at C. It potentially could be C plus because flash flyer can ambush something with the
Yeah, I would have
2/3.
graded that at C too. So I can see that if that's your evaluation, then C makes sense.
But you give it a B minus. So for you, it seems that casting the spells with flash or flying from the top of your library is worth a significant improvement.
Yeah, I was thinking so. Now the kind of awkward part is the white blue is kind of like the Knights deck, so I don't know how many actual flyers they're gonna have. But if you could prioritize some flyers, like if you had 5 flying creatures in your deck or something, then like some amount of the time you are gonna get to like draw and play a creature off of this and advance your board. A whole 2 gradations maybe is ambitious. Maybe I should have gone C plus instead. But I think it kind of looks like the ability is completely useless, but I think it's a little better than that. Although it's maybe, yeah, it's probably not as big a difference. So I think if I had to grade this again, probably C plus is better.
Maybe you have a couple of those flash auras. No, they have flash those auras that give minus X minus O.
True, true.
So maybe you can
You can maybe
slightly build
fudge
around
the
to make it
numbers a
good.
little bit. Yeah.
But then it will be built around grade in a way. I still think C plus. Yeah, I might go with it, but I'm still going to probably stay around closer to C than C plus.
Okay. All right. Zimone and Dina, we also have a little bit of a difference here. So black, green, blue for a legendary human dryad. It's mythic. You get a 3/4. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. And you can tap and sacrifice another creature to draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you control 8 or more lands, repeat this process once. I could sort of see how the game could become about this card, which is very, very powerful for a 3-drop. A 3-mana 3/4, very good. Although I don't really think we can necessarily value it as like a 3-drop because it takes some time to set up your mana. So I think this card really wouldn't be that much different if it was like 4 mana and literally the rest. Like if we added a generic mana in limited, it's almost going to be the same card unless you just happen to have like the right curve out with the game lands, etc. But anyways, pretty efficient card getting the 3/4. How much is the ability worth? Well, being able to sacrifice something allows you to instantly turn on the drain, and you get to draw the card, which is nice. Being able to do this again is 8 or more lands, which is going to come up definitely in the format. But even ignoring the second repeat of it, it's just like a lot needs to happen to be able to set this card up for it to be the legitimately powerful card it is. I think if everything's working, this card is going to be super, super good. But it just does require like quite a bit of setup. You want things to sacrifice. It is 3 colors. There's just like a lot you need to do. So I thought, if you jump through the hoops, it's going to be awesome. But for me, it's like a few too many hoops to jump through. So I gave it a B minus.
Yeah, no, I can see that happening. I'm envisaging in a deck that has also those things that give hexproof, that are leaving a disposable body behind that you can sacrifice easily. I do count the fact that if you have 8 lands, you can actually, at the end of turn of your opponent, use the ability, and then you also draw 2 cards, so you still get the drain trigger because you'll draw 2 cards from the ability of Zimone. And Dina, I gave it a B plus. I might be wrong. I probably should be more like a B minus with a build around B plus, because I think that this card will be much better if you open it early and you try to build around it.
But there are no build arounds in our rules, right?
And there are
It's
no build arounds in our
how did
rules.
the
Yeah.
17 lands users do at the end of the format? That's going to be the question. So hopefully they all build around it correctly for the B plus grade, right?
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Let's
But
hope.
I might have. Yeah, I might have overdone it then. In that case, still, I think it's a neat card.
I really like it. Yeah.
Inga and Essica, 2 green blue, legendary creature and human god. 4/4. Creatures you control have vigilance and tap, add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. Whenever you cast a creature spell, if 3 or more mana from creatures was spent to cast it, draw a card. You gave it a B, I gave it a C plus, so it is a difference. I don't think it's that major of a difference, to be fair. It's still like you evaluate this slightly higher. I think that a lot of the time it's going to be a vanilla 4/4 that is harder to cast, and that's part of my evaluation. I know that there's some upside, and that's why it's a C plus, not a C. And I like the fact that it gives vigilance to everything. But yeah, that was just enough to push me to a C plus level.
And I'm quite a bit different actually in the B range for this card, giving it a B, because I sort of think as blue green as like the transform color. So it's pretty mana intensive. There's a lot of incubation type stuff going on. So this allows you to use some of your creatures to cast creatures, but you can also advance your board using your mana to make those creatures better by either transforming them or flipping your tokens. It also gets a slight bump because there's some cool cats in the picture.
Oh yeah, no,
And so
that goes.
uh overall I just think like you're going to be happy with this card. And the second part of the card where you can tap 3 creatures to start drawing cards, it's not always going to come up, but when it does, it's going to kind of like take over the game because you're going to draw cards into more creatures, which can let you like, it's going to feel like stupid like Sprout Swarm did way back in the day. Not every time the card comes down, but sometimes.
Yep, I mean, makes sense. I mean, we'll see how it will play out in the end. Thanks, Neo Sant, for the sub, by the way. I do appreciate it greatly.
All right, next up, a big one. We got Omnath, Locus of All, white, blue, red, green, and a Phyrexian black mana. So either 4 or 5 mana total. You get a 4/4 legendary Phyrexian elemental Omnath. It's rare. If you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. So it just kind of sits in your mana pool moving forward. And it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card if it has 3 or more colored mana symbols in its mana cost. If you do, add 3 mana in any combination of its colors and put it in your hand. If you don't reveal it, put it into your hand. So in limited, almost every single time you flip a card, basically at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you just get to draw a card. So you reveal what it is and you put it in your hand. That's pretty good. What's holding this card back is that it costs white, blue, red, green. So 4 colors of mana is a lot, even with mana fixing in the set. There's not really a ton of ways to double fix that I saw. Like a bunch of the green mana fixing was like you can get 1 extra color, not 2. And so that's a huge difference because a lot of the 3-color legends is like, okay, you only need 1 extra color. Like we can make that work. 2 is like you're acquiring this. And so it kind of reminds me of a little bit of the Atraxa problem, where like this card is like really powerful. Every single turn you can draw extra cards. A 4/4 life's great. But you have to kind of really warp your deck to play a bunch of clunky mana fixing a lot of the time to be able to even cast the Omnath. That being said, it's like really strong when you do so. So I think like it might bring the win rate down because of the deck that you play. Like in games where you don't get to cast Omnath, suddenly its win rate suffers greatly. But when you do cast it, like it's pretty easy to win those games as long as you cast it on time. Or relatively on time, because every turn you draw a card, and it also helps just fuel itself. I gave it a C minus overall. I don't love the card. but I can't deny the power behind it.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through the spoiler, just checking how many cards can trigger the mana ability, and there are some. There are some. So far in monocolored cards, I counted 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
That's more than I
11.
would have expected.
Well, because 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 cards in the set that have triple mana symbols on them
Mhm.
or more. Because, of course, like things like Polukranos that cost green, green, green are going to count as a card that has 3 mana symbols.
Oh, true.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be different mana symbols. It's also
Yeah, I
monocolored
did.
as well.
That does make it better. I was thinking as I read it, because it has a lot of words and they're confusing. I was thinking they did need to be different, but it makes sense they don't.
No, but okay. I mean, still, I think it's very hard to cast, and will be a cost on your deck building. And in the end, it turns into a 4 mana 4/4 that draws you a card every turn most of the time. Because I just counted 18 cards in the set, but they are all at very high rarity.
And
So
it still has to be in play.
yeah, exactly. And they have to be in the right exact place of the deck also, because you might just as well draw them from a different ability. So yeah, I gave it a D, mainly to warn people not to get excited and trying to play around, because the value out of it is just not great enough. And I think C minus is your way of telling that similar thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
That doesn't say I'm not going to try.
do as we say, not as we do.
Exactly. Jeru and Hazaret, 2 red, red, white. So 3 different mana colors. You can cast it from your Omnath, easy. Legendary creature, human god, 5/4. As long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, Jeru and Hazaret has vigilance and haste. Whenever Jeru and Hazaret attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may exile a legendary creature card from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order until end of turn. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. You gave it a D plus. I give it a C. I think you're right. I think it's a D plus, more than a C. The body is 5/4 without evasion is not great. Um, the vigilant and haste will possibly sometimes happen, but not always. So that's pretty bad. Um, Legends are not that abundant, and they are on high rarity, so the chance of you getting something is low. And if it even attacks with haste, you might try to do it, but you won't be able to play it, so you might as well skip, because you can only play those things until end of your current turn. So yeah, I think that you're right. It's more like a D plus than C that I gave it.
I basically was like, what is a 5 mana 5/4? I'm like, well, that's kind of like a D minus.
Hmm.
If like, I'd much rather have like a 4/5 because at least it rumbles a little better. How good is a 5/4 vigilance haste? I was like, well, that's like a C plus. It's also kind of hard to cast, and so the truth obviously is somewhere in the middle. So I
Hmm.
gave it a D plus.
Yep, that's
Yep.
that's something I can agree with.
All right, our next one is Invasion of Alara. It's all the colors. In fact, one of all the colors. It's a battle, and it says when it enters the battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile 2 non-land cards with mana value 4 or less. You may cast one of those 2 cards without paying its mana cost. Put one of them into your hand. Then put the other cards exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order, and has 7 defense. So for all the manas, you get a 2-for-1, and one of them goes immediately into play. So cascading, that's kind of cool. And then it flips on the backside if you can defeat 7 counters to Awaken the Maelstrom, a sorcery that's all colors. And it says target player draws 2 cards. You may put an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield, create a token that's a copy of a permanent you control, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 permanents, or among creatures you control, and destroy target permanent an opponent controls. So kind of reminds me of like the Kami War ish,
Mm.
although it's not always going to happen, right? Because 7 defense counters is a lot. So this card's really interesting because there's a million hoops to set up, right? You need to have all 5 colors. You need to be able to cast it. You need to get some good value off of it when you cascade, essentially, but that is going to be good. You get a 2-for-1 right away. However, you're probably going to be a little behind because you're trying to cast a 5-mana card, a 5-color card. But if you can ever flip it, like, you get a ton of value there, although putting an artifact card onto the battlefield probably not going to happen. But draw 2, copy something, put counters on things, destroy something, that does it. Like, you did the thing. My biggest concern with this card is if you're trying to play a deck that is trying to play all the colors, it's hard to have a bunch of creatures in play because those decks are often trying to, like, draw a bunch of cards, like try to stabilize, and then you play your haymaker. And so I really see it being difficult to deal this thing 7 damage, which means getting to the backside is really tough. And that's really where a lot of the value of it is. So again, I think it's really sweet. I don't necessarily think it's good. I give it a D, but well, I don't know. Oh, you know what? Keep going, and then I think there's a great comment we should address.
I think it's a C because I think the upside of the backside is just so good. I mean, this reminds me, like the mini game of Magma Opus in the format, like, because whenever you flip it, that's basically, you said, which one did you say?
I said Commune War just because it's like
Yeah.
a 5-mana thing that's hard to do,
that's
but
true.
really good.
I'm because of how many little things that give you edge the card does reminds me of Magma Opus, because it's like some draw,
No, that
some
makes sense. It's a
board
good
presence,
comparison.
some stuff.
Yeah.
And I just liked it from that aspect. Obviously, it will require building the deck in a particular way, but I also think that you can play multicolor decks that specialize in battle defeat, and I would see that in this sort of like a red-green chassis that has some splashy, splishy things, because part of the red-green battle package is the Invasion of Zendikar, which can search for lands and
Oh yeah,
things like
that's
that.
nice.
Yeah, because of that, I gave it a C, because I think that that's the kind of a deck I think I wouldn't be playing it.
Red green splash at all. I love it. And anyways, so you're thinking of C. I can see it. I just think it's going to be really hard to make work, but I hope you're right, because that would be way more fun.
I'm gonna try the hell out of it.
Sear Sky in the chat said, "Isn't there a legend in every pack with a bonus sheet?" Yes, there is, of course. So when we were talking about the legends before, I believe,
Oh yeah,
that
that's true.
obviously makes the card better.
You mean the Hazoret and the...
Yeah. So I mean, you'll be able to get a legend now and again much more than usual.
Yeah, that's true. There is a legend in every pack. So we can put Ragavans and...
So it's probably not a D plus, that other card. It's probably
Yep.
more like maybe it's a C at the end of the day.
Wait, that's closer to my grade.
You're like, this was a genius comment.
Indeed, Saved by the Bell. I'm unconsciously. I knew that.
To be fair, I don't think it changes it that much, because then you still need the red-white legends specifically out of those packs, right? Red and white. So
and
you
I
have
think again, the upside of the card is just not something impressive. It's just not like this one. I'm putting maybe a card that doesn't do anything and rots in my hand, but boy, the upside is there. And this one just like, yeah, it's slightly better. Okay, we did the multicolors, and we can just continue with the white rares and mythics.
Yeah.
My turn or your turn?
I can start. That's fine.
Go on.
So now we're going to be doing the white rares and mythics. Okay. So starting off, we've got the cards that we agree with the most, and eventually we'll be furiously raging at each other by the end, because we'll have such great disagreements, as you just saw recently with the all the crazy Alara disagreements, all the colors, etc., etc. So welcome everyone. First up in white is Archangel Elspeth. 2 white for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker Elspeth at Mythic, and +1 to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink, -2 to put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, and it becomes an angel and has flying forever. And -6, return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So mostly when looking at this card, I'm thinking, okay, how good is it to pump out 1/1 lifelink tokens? Archangel Elspeth protecting herself and also ticking up, pretty good. How good is it to put counters on things and make things flying to kill your opponent? Pretty good. But that alone, I was thinking that kind of makes this card an A minus. I didn't worry too much about the ultimate, although because the +1 protects Elspeth, it's not going to be that hard to get to -6. So in games where it's valuable to return a bunch of cheap things from your graveyard to the battlefield, I think that will be an option more often than not. But I didn't really evaluate it as a big part of the card because your mana curves often aren't going to be quite that low enough for it to really matter. Though it can return battles and things too, which is pretty nice. All in all, we both said this card's an A minus. It's pretty much a bomb, and yes, take it. Put it in your white decks.
Yeah, it's a weird wording on the card that it gains flying, and I know this permanently, but do we have other cards that
No,
something can gain permanently
it's
flying and
because
that
it's
doesn't sell,
Elspeth. They wanted to be fancy and special. I
or
don't
they
know.
just couldn't put a flying counter on
Counter.
something because they have too many words on the card.
Well, it's confusing because it has +1/+1 counters, so that adds multiple counter
Oh yeah.
types.
Next card we have, and wow, did we ever? No, it's strange.
I think we're going to
Did we
start
agree?
arguing immediately.
Did we agree only on one card in white? Wow.
Absolutely.
Dusk Legion Duelist, 1 and a white for a creature vampire soldier. It's a 2/2 with vigilance, and whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. That ability triggers only once each turn. You give it a B minus. I give it a C plus. I give it a C plus, despite my love to the +1/+1 counter archetype, and I don't know why actually, because putting a one counter on it from backup or something, and it's a 3/3 vigilance that drew me a card, which is great.
Do you want
So
to
I
retroactively change your grade?
I think I will be closer to you. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that B minus sounds good.
Okay, so we still agree. Okay, so this one we said B minus.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for the retrospective episode, my first grade is going to
we
count.
of course graded these in our own little corners, and then said, well, what did you do? What did we do? So the fact that we agreed so often actually was kind of impressive. But
Oh yeah, true.
yeah,
We never saw our grades before we
yeah,
compiled them.
100% honest. Okay, next up, Guardian of Girapur, 2 and a white for a 3/3 angel at rare, has flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to one other target creature or artifact you control. Return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next instep. This card also seems pretty busted, so I probably am too low on it. I gave it a B because I was thinking, hey, 3/3 flyer for 3, that's pretty good. But 3/3 flyer for 3, that's probably a B minus actually. So how good is the ability? Well, Flicker Wisping something is pretty nice. But it can only hit your thing, so it's not like it's gonna kill like tokens from your opponent on like a true Flicker Wisp. And how often you're gonna get like an enter the battlefield effect off of it? Some of the time. So I bumped it up. I said like this is a B. And yeah, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna stick with B. But you're thinking B plus. I could respect that too.
Yeah, I just added slightly more bonus for the ability to get the ETBs because I think there's just enough of those. Ah, lucky me. Invasion of Theros. It's a battle. 2 and a white, 4 defense. When Invasion of Theros enters the battlefield, search your library for an aura god or demigod card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And this 4 defense, as I mentioned, and flips into Ephara Ever Sheltering, a blue-white 4/4 creature. It has lifelink and indestructible as long as you control at least 3 other enchantments. It's an enchantment itself. Whenever another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And, in some sets, this card would have been an A. But I don't think that we are in one of those sets. I just think that there's not enough artifacts. Yes, the battle part of it can tutor for the pacifism or arrest effect. Maybe there's a couple of other auras that you can do. There's actually a couple of gods and demigods in the set, which we can.
Yeah, well, you're doing that search. I mean,
Oh
we're
yeah,
not on
yeah,
Theros, right? So the
yeah.
fact that there's not just enchantments everywhere and gods and demigods and auras
There are
means we're,
Egyptian
we're
gods in
we
the
are
set as well.
merely we are merely invading Theros. It is
Yeah,
but a small part of what's going on.
there are Egyptian gods as well.
Oh yeah.
From Amonkhet. I mean, not Amonkhethian. They're totally not Egyptian. From Amonkhet, which only slightly resembles Egypt for some reason. So maybe in some decks it's going to be slightly better if you have like three good targets for the invasion part of it, and then you will probably most of the time have Ephara Evil Sheltering as a vanilla 4/4, which is not that great. That's why I gave it a C. You gave it a C minus.
Yeah, I just didn't think it was that great, but I think the fact that there is an arrest for 2 mana that you kind of already want to pick anyways, right? That's like a C plus level card. Um, if you maybe already had one of those and you see this a little bit later, you think, oh, okay, well, I already have one. Maybe you prioritize the next one a little bit higher because if you get 2 of those and then you just pick like some random aura just to make sure you have a third target in your deck, um, and then you can either you can use those auras to help flip this, which isn't amazing because you do a little bit of work to turn, like you use that to then get a 4/4. But if you kind of think of like 4/4 kill something, which is kind of what this card is. Now, admittedly, it takes extra mana to do that, right? You go get the arrest, you pay an extra 2. So it's kind of becomes like a 5 mana 4/4 arrest something, and give your opponent some life because you had to enable some attacks to do so. That's still pretty good. But things have to go right to get there. And obviously there's upsides and downsides. If you never flip this, it's pretty bad. But even the fail case of like, play this, go get your arrest, cast it. I mean, it was a 5 mana removal spell, not a great thing, but that's kind of the floor, assuming you draft it with in mind, which is reasonable. I was thinking C minus, and sometimes it'll be better, sometimes it'll be worse.
Yeah, I
Sometimes
think
you'll
I
have a
agree.
god or demigod, and you're gonna feel like really smart.
There is the -4/-4 aura in black that also can be searched with that.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, if you're in white black, this card gets a little better than
So that's in that. There's two
there's the
demigods in
there's the
the
blue aura that
multiverse.
shrinks things, though I don't know that it's great because it's kind of hard to flip the battle with that, but it's still something.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, they're so just be on the lookout if you get it
Or
late or
the
something.
ultimate combo, you can be in white green and you can go get that like heck that pump enchantment that can cycle. So you just do this, you go get that enchantment, you pay 2 to cycle it, and then you've spent 5 mana to do nothing. So that's
I was think
wonderful.
I was thinking I was thinking about that card and can you play it on the 0/1 hexproof thing? There's actually three demigods in the set and three
Ooh.
gods. So there is the choice that you have. You have Renata, Daxos, and Timurit, and you have Inga and Essika, Hazaret,
But
and
there's probably some gods and demigods on the bonus sheet too, maybe.
yeah,
Who
no,
knows? Oh,
demigods are
that's what you're
only on the
saying?
bonus.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there
yeah.
are
Okay.
three demigods on the bonus sheet and
Oh.
three gods on the main sheet, but not vice versa.
Mhm.
Bunch of auras. So yeah, there are some targets technically. So you can hope for that, but not that much. Still, I think C-C. That's fine.
All right, we got a good one here. We got Elish Norn. No comma, no nothing else, just Elish Norn. 2 white white for a 3/5 Praetor at Mythic. Elish Norn has Vigilance, and whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, that source's controller loses 2 life unless they pay 1. And then you can pay 2 and a white, sacrifice 3 other creatures to exile Elish Norn, return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, and activate only as a sorcery. So I'll get to the backside, but let's kind of digest this a moment first. So 4 mana for a 3/5 Vigilance, pretty good card already right there. That would probably be like a B minus level card because it just kind of rumbles. The ability is pretty busted. Anytime your opponent hurts you or anything you control, they have to pay a bunch of mana or lose a bunch of life. That's really annoying. But at the end of the day, your opponent also can just kill Elish Norn. Like it didn't do anything if it dies. 3 power makes it a little bit vulnerable in the set to like Vanquish the Weak and some of the other removal spells. And also because the ability is only sacrifice, the sacrifice ability is at sorcery speed. Heaven forbid you sacrifice everything and then your opponent like bounces Elish Norn. That's a complete disaster. So, and you can't do it in response to like removal on other things. But the ability is like pretty good, and we haven't even gone to the backside. So if the coast is clear, you can sacrifice some weak creatures, and then you get to flip it, Elish Norn, into the Argent Etchings, which is a saga. So chapter 1, immediately you incubate 5 times, then transform all incubator tokens you control. So if you're able to flip Elish Norn, you get 10 worth of power and toughness across 5 bodies. That's insanely good. The following turn, you go to chapter 2. You get creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain double strike until the end of turn. Probably not going to see chapter 3 because your opponent is now dead from chapter 2. But if for some reason that happened, you didn't win the game on chapter 2, destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians, exile the Argent Etchings, then return back to the front side of Elish Norn. So wipe everything basically, except for maybe a couple things for your opponents, and of course all the insane things you put into play. So for evaluating just the front side of Elish Norn, I kind of value that at like maybe B plus because it's really annoying. Good body, good rate. But the fact that you can flip it into this just insane win condition relatively easily, but there is some risk involved, so you have to choose your spots. I bumped it up to an A- because of that. But I could easily see you were saying it's an A. Certainly, when you get into that backside, it's going to feel like an A for sure.
Yeah, maybe with more careful play pattern, not to expose it too much to the removal, and maybe try to make it a 7 mana instant flip. I think it might be a stronger play pattern. But yeah, card is clearly busted, and it's splitting hair, and I don't have many of those to split anymore. So if it's an A- or an A. Knight Errant of Eos, 4
However
and a
you
white.
want. However you want.
I would go Eos, but probably it's Eos in Americanized version. But also somehow they want to say Kieldorian and not Shieldorian, so pronunciation magic doesn't have anything to do with human languages. Knight Errant of Eos, 4 and a white for a human knight. It's a 4/4. It has Convoke. When Knight Errant of Eos enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards with mana value X or less from among them, where X is the number of creatures that convoke Knight Errant of Eos. Put the revealed cards into your hand and then shuffle. So a 4/4 that potentially can draw you 2 cards. I'm assuming that the sweet spot is to convoke it for 3 and then get 2 3-drops into your hand. Now, it's not Coco. It goes to your hand. So you have to engage 3 creatures and you only put 1. So it leaves you slightly vulnerable on the next turn, and then you can take over. And that is why I gave it a B- and not a B. I still think it's very strong. I'm still going to play it a lot. But I think that it either requires a specially tuned deck that will be able to convoke 3 without too much risk, or it might be played slightly later. Of course, if you convoke it for 3 and it only costs 2 mana, so you probably have enough mana to cast at least one of those 3 mana things that you drew. But again, I've played enough with Coco to know that even when you look at the 6 cards, getting 2 creatures of the right mana value in your deck in those 6 cards is not guaranteed by any means as well. So there is a fail potential of the card.
Yeah, I mean the biggest fail potential of the card. I mean, I see where he's coming with B-. Certainly the card is going to be worse. Like if you've been trading off in the game and it's not setting up for a convoke play like you want, and this is a 5-mana 4/4 that doesn't do anything, that's a pretty bad fail case. So I gotta admit that. But I think also it's not that hard to get like 2 creatures going, and if you go like 2-drop, 3-drop this, I think it's still going to be pretty good because maybe your 2-drop no longer can attack, and you might be able to get like a 2, even a single 2-drop out of the top 6 means that you got a 4/4 into play for pretty cheap, and you got a 2-drop in your hand. The sweet spot, like you said, is 3, but I think even if you hit once in the top 6 cards, you're going to be pretty reasonably happy because probably in those cases you tap 3 things, but then you, like you said, you probably have 3 extra mana, so you get a 4/4 down to protect you, and then you get your 3-drop as well. So like you've really added a lot of power into play. Not to mention there's like go wide strategies with counters and all this other stuff. And then, if the board does stall out, tapping and trying to look for 5-drops is a thing. I don't think it's going to come up that often, but it could potentially be a thing, especially if you have other things to do with your mana. Like the trick I think with this card is you want to make sure that when you fail, you have something else to do. Because the worst thing you can do is like tap all your things, convoke, be like, I have this mana to cast this card, and then, oh, sorry, there's no creatures on top of your deck. Come again next week. So it just it's a kind of a wild card because it really matters how good it is based on the board state. And so envisioning it, you have to think about every single one of these. In the best case scenario, I think, you tap all your creatures, you get 2/5 drops, and then you played one of them because this was free, and like that's an A- level card. You have this scenario where this is literally a 5 mana 4/4, and that's like a D-. So, and you have literally everything in between. But I think you do have all that optionality, which to me adds up to a B. But complicated card.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it's going to be very powerful in constructed formats when you can actually make sure that you chain those, for example.
Also, can we say how cool Convoke is? It's such a fun mechanic because
It
it just
is.
like you always get to play Magic basically, but you're always fighting to be like, I'm behind, but I can tap these couple things and just try to stay in the game, and yeah, it's just fun.
Yeah. Also, can we say how weird is the templating of the last thing that it doesn't put it on the bottom of the library?
Do they just? Oh, you just look at them?
Yeah, you shuffle. You basically shuffle your whole deck.
Oh yeah, that is weird. But I think they just do that so that it's faster on like arena and things. I don't know.
Or because they didn't fit, put them on the bottom of the library in random order on the card.
Yeah, do you see the little like hollow foil? It's kind of bumping up a little bit.
Yeah,
If you added those few extra words, then it would have that's Pandora's box right there. You don't want to mess with that.
exactly. um, who was now? Is it you?
I don't know. I can read it. Boonbringer Valkyrie is a sweet one. It's 3 white for a 4/4 Angel Warrior at rare. This card has backup 1, and what do you get? You get Flying First Strike and Lifelink. So you get a Baneslayer Angel, quite literally. Maybe no protection from demons and dragons, or you get a slightly smaller Baneslayer Angel that temporary Baneslayer Angel's something else, and leaves behind the counter on it. So it's Baneslayer Angel with upside, which I mean, that's insanely good. The only reason I didn't give it any plus is if your opponent kills it. Well, even if they kill it, you still probably got value instantly by putting the counter somewhere else. I mean, this card might be A plus. I sort of held it back because it's just a creature that you're putting into play. I gave it an A, but it is insanely good. And can you imagine you play your Yargle and then you just boop, fly it in the air, 19 them?
The
Of course,
dream continues in your Abzan.
you just need your white, black, green mana curve. But yeah,
Listen,
anyways, this card's a total bomb. One of the best cards in the
I
set.
gave it A minus, which is still a total bomb.
Mhm.
But I think I'm going to be happy with the A minus evaluation on it. Let's see how it will work. But luckily, it was an easy card. Next, we have Sunfall. 3 white for a sorcery. Exile all creatures, incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. So if you exile 6 creatures in total, you get a 6 counters on an incubator token. You gave it A minus. I gave it a B plus. I think it's going to be very close between those two. If I open it, I want to build around it. Maybe build a controlling deck that allows me to wait for the sunfall and trap the opponent. Good part of it is, unlike most of the sweepers, you don't mind terribly that you're losing creatures because you're gaining something really big out of the deal. So you can lure opponent into fake complacency, but they think that a sweeper is not going to happen, and then you have that sweeper, and all of a sudden they are very sad, and you have an 8/8.
Yeah, that's the reason I gave it that A minus, because it's like you can play into it a little bit. You're like, my 2 drop and 3 drop. I'm just playing my hand out, and like you get their like 4 and 5 drop, and maybe even something else, right? So maybe you 3 for 3, but you get like a 6/6 in addition, and their cards were way better than yours. So
Yeah, I gave it a B plus because control decks are hard to play, so they usually have a slightly lower win rate.
I guess I'm just saying I don't think you could just put this in a mid range deck, and I think it's going to be
That's
good.
possibly true. I think we're close on the grade.
Mhm.
We have a lot of differences, but they are like 1 grade differences, which are not really significant in those
Yeah,
white cards.
no giant heated debates. Although I guess here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. Progenitor Exarch. Get ready for the very heated debate here. It costs a white and then double X for a 1/2 Phyrexian cat cleric. Oh, you like it because it's a cat. I get it. This is a rare, and when Progenitor Exarch enters the battlefield, incubate 3x times. So for 3 mana, you get a 1/2 and a 3/3 incubate token. For 5 mana, you get a 1/2 and 2 of those, and it scales from there. So I mean that's like pretty good, of course. And it's also a 1-drop, so you could convoke or it sits in play. It's annoying. Although usually I would recommend not playing this for 1 mana. It also has tap transform target incubator token you control. I guess if you know you're going to curve out with incubation tokens, then I could actually see playing it on 1 mana. Like there's the 1/1 uncommon that comes with a incubation token, and then any fractions you flip get a counter. So if you went like 1-drop into that, you could immediately make a 3/3 on turn 2, which is pretty good. So given the right curves, I mean that's an option. But mostly it's going to be like a 3 or 5 mana play that gives you an additional 3/3 or 5/5, which is kind of like the incubation sack a little bit from Phyrexia LB1. Obviously a little bit better because this is a lot more mana efficient. You don't have to keep paying 4 mana over and over. You just kind of have to do it once because this just keeps flipping them. But all that being said, I guess it's flexible, it's powerful, but you just get some 3/3s. I think once you get to 7, this card's insane. But I gave it a B because I think it's going to be pretty good, but you do still have to spend some mana. It takes some time. Maybe it's a B plus. Maybe it's a little better than that. But yeah.
Okay, so I'm just digging into our previous grade. So you think it's just barely better than Norn's Inquisitor?
Was that the one I mentioned?
Yeah, you gave it a B minus.
Yeah, that's why I said you're right. It's probably I think this is probably a B plus.
Yeah, okay.
I think B is a little low.
Yeah, I mean it might be a B plus. I might have evaluated slightly on the fairy tale scenarios when it's amazing, but I think that if you draft the deck right, you actually will be quite okay casting it for 1 mana, gaining early value out of it, and then it can trade off. You can rebuy it and recast it for 7 mana or for 5 mana, and you're in a happy town. I think that there's also the discard card that if you miss, it makes a 3/3 incubate. And in some cases, with the card like this, you may actually play it without a reason of exiling anything from the opponent's hands, except for like some atrocious bombs, just to make a 3/3 incubate token and activate it. Yeah, again, A minus B plus. I'm happy with both of those evaluations because they're quite close to each other. I do like the card.
Okay, I'll come up to B plus on it.
Invasion of Gobakan. Battle for 1 and white. When Invasion of Gobakan enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it, but a spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast. So basically the ability of Elite Spellbinder, but without the 3/1 flying body, and for 1 mana less. But it comes with a 3 defense battle, and when it flips, you get Light Shield Array enchantment at the beginning of your end step. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn, and you can sacrifice it, and creature you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Now, this I think is the classic example of a battle that is designed for constructed, because in constructed, this thing is going to be really, really strong against some types of decks. But it's still a strong card in limited because it's only 3 defense. If you attack it, then you will have attacked with some creatures, so instant value at the end of turn that it flips. You'll get +1/+1 counters on your things. And the ability to sacrifice it to prevent something bad happening to your creatures is also neat. Having said that, I think that the front side is nice because it allows you to see the hand of your opponent and plan the strategy around it. But also, you either have to cast it early, or you will have very few targets on maybe targets that opponent will be, capable of paying the 2 extra mana at that stage of the game. So it has this weird tension of if I play it early, I don't contribute to the board, therefore I cannot flip it early. If I play it too late, I don't have a target to the first side ability. And I thought that this tension is awkward enough for me to give it only a B minus, but I might be swayed to give it a B.
Yeah, the reason I went all the way to B plus on this is really like the power of this card is mostly on the backside. And so when you evaluate those cards, it's like, well, if I'm not able to flip it and the front side is not that good, then it's really just not that great a card. That being said, 3 defense is like so low. I mean, we really only see that I think also on the Zendikar one. And I think this card being as cheap as it is, only being 2 mana, means you can kind of set it up with a double spell to like punch through. And all of a sudden, if you do that, then all the creatures that did attack that turn suddenly are bigger. And so you've completely snowballed while taking your opponent's answer or making it awkward for them, right? Because they have to pay a bunch of mana. So I think playing this card on like turn 3, 4, or 5 is going to be backbreaking, especially on turn 4 or 5. If you're able to double spell, like maybe you have the 2 mana arrest where you like play this, arrest their blocker, attack with 2 creatures, flip this, put a counter on each creature, whatever. So it's going to lead to like some pretty nasty game states. Now, as a top deck, probably not great. You're right. If you're not already able to attack, then this was just like a literal 2 mana do nothing. That is something to be a little bit wary of. But I think it's also, well, not the best thing to do on turn 2. It's serviceable because you can look at their hand, maybe disrupt their curve, think about how you're going to sequence to be able to maybe flip this or just best play against the known information. So I think it just does enough. And in the games where you do have those dream scenarios, like this single-handedly can win you the game, and it's a 2 mana card. So I'm just really impressed by it. So B plus for me.
Okay. We can disagree on cards. That's legal.
We can and we did. I think this one's me.
And we continue to disagree.
Yeah, Monastery Mentor, it's back. 2 and a white for a 2/2 human monk at Mythic. It has prowess, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess. I mostly just think most limited decks don't have that many non-creature spells in them. I know that battles are non-creature spells, but I also think, white is all about just putting a bunch of creatures into play most of the time. Now, some of the spells make creature tokens with the incubate. So if you're able to play like a white-based deck that has more of the incubation tokens, maybe you're playing 10 actual creatures, but then really you're playing like 15 with the Monastery Mentor, but like you're playing 13 spells. Obviously, this card's going to be a lot better in those spots. But I think you do kind of need to build around it. And you do need to play a few spells, I think, for this to really take off, because the 3 mana 2/2 prowess mode is just not that good, right? Like a 3 mana 2/2 prowess is like, I don't know, a C plus. And so I noted that, yeah, you're going to get to play some non-creatures. It's going to be good. I gave this a B minus for that. But I think for you to really like make Monastery Mentor insane, you need to play multiple spells. And I don't see like a white-based spell-based deck in the format. Now, maybe you splash the Mentor and make that work, but even the other colors don't really have spell-based decks either. There's just a few random prowess creatures that we're looking at. Most of the things care about creatures and battles and getting on the board. So we'll have to see, but it would have to be a deck trying to really support this rather than it slotting in a deck. So I think people might kind of play it incorrectly for that reason.
I mean, I see it as a potential card that will utilize some cards that will be underdrafted, which will make it a bit stronger. Like Inspiring Charge, I don't think has a good home. And I think if you have a Monastery Mentor in your deck, that's already a better home for the Inspiring Charge. Maybe some kind of white-red, go wide strategy with Rouse Reinforcements, and this could be a viable, or some kind of Jeskai spells. But I think it's going to be like maybe a one-off kind of situation. I still think that you have, I think, enough spells in the format that you can actually try to build the whiteboard, and you will always get an Inspired Charge in your draft. So you will always have this capacity of going from Monastery Mentor to 3 creatures on board into something that is lethal.
True. Yeah, I mean that scenario is definitely really, really good.
But yeah, I think maybe B plus is maybe exaggerated. Maybe it's more like a B. It's still a good card though. And again, the fact that the battles are spells and that you can play a couple of other spells before.
Yeah, I understand. I get
it. I can see some scenarios where you play a battle, use your monk that you created to convoke the thing that gives flying to a creature, instantly attack the battle, and you have a bunch of monks, for example. I think that, like, especially that give creature flying with convoke spell is pretty good in that kind of mix as well. And
Yeah, it is really good with convoke spells. That's true.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not stuck on the B plus grade there. I wrote it down because,
Well, I'm
again,
just happy to see. We'll see where it is at the end, and one of us
yeah,
is going to be wrong, so that's always fun.
it will be for one of us. Oh God, why? Why do I get
It
this?
is a god. You're right.
Heliod, the Radiant Dawn, 2 white, God, legendary enchantment creature, 4/4. So a 4/4/4/4. That's already a C. Let's see if we can go further than the C from it. You don't think so? I think so. When Heliod, the Radiant Dawn enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. That won't happen very often, but maybe sometimes. 3 and 5 Rex and blue transform Heliod the Radiant Dawn, activate only as a sorcery. It flips into a 4/6. You may cast spells as though they had flash. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. It's a mouthful. So you may cast everything on your opponent's turn, and everything that you cast costs 1 less when you flip it. I think that's good enough to make it into a B. 4/6 is massive. It evades most of the removal. That's why I gave it a B, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just thought this card's front side is basically a nothing burger, so we're really looking at always flipping it, which means you kind of play Heliod, and then unless you flip it immediately, wait a turn, flip it on your next turn, and then you kind of get the mana back pretty quickly, which is nice because you do get the cost reduction, but you're kind of investing 7 or 8 mana to be able to get the 4/6, which admittedly is a good card. But it's just a lot of mana to not do that much. I do like that everything has flash. It messes like your opponent. It's really hard to attack you when you have flipped Heliod because do you have a flash flare? Do you have removal spells? Do you have nothing? Like it really makes it awkward for your opponent. But most of the time, it's just going to make everything one cheaper. And so the whole combo means like you investing and maybe it's great, but often it's just only a little better than a 4/4 for 4, which is why I just gave it a C plus because I agree. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like a C. I'm not discounting that it's better than that, but for me it just doesn't quite get to the B range. And if it does get to B range, I'm going to be happy to be wrong because it's kind of sweet.
Yeah. I already can imagine opponents having the Sift battle in their hand and thinking
They just
whether
can't play it.
they should cast it or not.
Yeah, part of its power might be like hidden, right? These types of cards where you make it awkward for your opponent and then you don't know how good it is because it's based on what your opponent actually has. That's a good point.
Yeah. And actually, when you think about it, maybe there are ways of building around the ETB ability once you have it early in your draft.
Mhm.
Maybe there are some ways of getting enchantments into
Well,
graveyard for extra value.
blue has some decent amount of self mill, so you might be able to randomly mill like one of your auras and bring it back.
I mean,
So
knowing my luck, I would just mill Heliod and. But okay, I mean, this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out.